the Ranting Geeks Pondercast.
Okay, well, welcome to the Pondercast. This is the final one for Andor Season 2, episodes 10, 11, and 12. We made it. We got to the very end. We're your usual cast. This is Mensa Boy.
This is Legend Maker.
Phantom 6.
And Rex Quasar!
Ah!
There you go. So, gentlemen, we made it to the end, and I guess I'll kick off and I'll say, wow, I thought it was a very good wrap up of a very, very good season of a very, very good show. That's my headline. And what do you guys think of how it ended?
Well, I'm going to just kind of jump in a little bit here because I'm thinking so much for all your discussions about Vader showing up and then the Emperor showing up.
No, we didn't get
or dead returning to the rebellion.
No,
I did think it was a nice touch that she wound up on this, or appeared to wind up in the same prison that Andor was locked in.
Yeah, there was no return of the guy in that prison, this Andy Serkis character, Kino, whatever his name was.
Sadly, Kino Loy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
All those sound like more expensive things, so they watched the budget in the finale.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
No, there's a new Star Wars coming out called Kino and Dedra.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, right. Rex Quasar will watch that one.
I think not.
I might pass on that one myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's not got enough.
There was a few touches in there that caught my eye or caught my attention. I was kind of wondering, okay, wait a minute, did I just see what I think I just saw? Like one of the things was Partagaz.
Partagaz.
When he opened that drawer, it showed the gun in the drawer, and it looked a heck of a lot like Han Solo's gun.
Yes, I saw the same thing. I got that written down.
Yeah, it's a C96 Mauser. It just has doesn't have the long scope on it. But other than
was there anything to that, or are they just like?
No, in fact, those Imperial sidearms, if you remember in Star Wars when they first go on the Death Star and they kill those two black suited security guys in the communication center, they have those blasters on their hip. So that's an Imperial officer blaster, basically. It's like
where did Han Solo get an Imperial pistol?
Well, if you remember, he was actually part of the Empire's cadet corps to fly TIE fighters. So.
You're right.
I forgot.
But wasn't
in Solo, remember, it was modular. It was kind of a core piece to a rifle that he disassembled.
Yeah, but wasn't in Solo, what's his name gave him that weapon, didn't he? He tossed it to him. He took
the Woody Harrelson character gave it to him.
Yeah.
And I can't remember his character's name.
Yeah, so. I don't.
It's not hard. It's not hard to guess where Woody Harrelson's character would have gotten it from.
Woody Harrelson and his toupee
stole it off of a cold, dead Imperial officer. That's where he would have gotten it from.
That's right. I think that's right. It was appropriated from a dead enemy, for sure.
Yeah.
I did a freeze frame just to look at that, and it is different. It's similar, but it is different than Solo's. So
it's similar, but it doesn't have the long scope. Believe me, I obsessed over that gun because I built 4 versions of it over the years, and it is definitely similar, but it has the shortened Imperial thing, and it's not a scope on the Imperial one. It's like a coiled cord, like a power cord, and I think in some books they call it a Merson, MERRSONN blaster, and I have no idea why.
I think it was the grip that caught my attention initially. I mean, it only showed it for a second.
Yeah, it's the same C96 Mauser grip and the same tip on Solo's gun. Exact same one.
I guess that's enough about a random gun.
Yep.
So
I thought that was pretty cool how he took himself out. He did not want to get exposed to the Imperial torture, I guess.
Pretty cliche.
Yeah, it's just like Hitler's bunker kind of thing. But the thing that the show did that I thought was very, very good was the way it wove K2SO in there like nothing. He didn't miss a beat from Rogue One. It was this Alan Tudyk's performance, the exact same kind of guy, and I love that character.
Yeah, but the robot, the B2 EMO or whatever that he just disappears from the storyline, right? And
yeah, they kind of just took him out. I mean, he's at the very end there where they show Bix on the planet with the baby.
Okay.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
his
but
friend.
you had predicted, and I thought it was a good idea, that his brain would be like sort of transformed in some way into K2SO to sort of
Well,
explain.
I was
That
trying
would
to
happen.
explain, we talked about this last time. I was trying to explain why K2SO has that personality, but they didn't go for that. So
I
Okay, but
think
wait, and
that's
you
one of the
something
missed
something the
opportunities.
something the mental boy just said reminded me of something that I saw this past week. When I watched the last episode, I turned it off when the episode was over, but I read somewhere that there was a post-credit scene. Did y'all see that?
no,
No.
I did not.
No.
And I haven't heard anything about that. And I've listened to, other people talk about the show, and they didn't say.
There was
So I
a
don't
there was a
Maybe
post credit on season 1 with those little robots building the Death Star.
Yeah,
Right.
you got to see what those
Maybe-
parts were they were
Yeah.
building in the.
Maybe I just misread something then.
It's a Marvel hallucination.
I swear I
actually-
saw Sinbad in the Death Star.
Yeah, exactly. I actually like the fact that at the very end of the show, they kind of shifted to an orchestral score, like typical Star Wars movies, and that was something they hadn't done the whole show. Really, they didn't really do a big sweeping.
Well, they also switched to the Star Wars theme at the end of when they
Yeah.
were playing the credits.
Well, you know what I noticed about all of that is, so I don't know if you guys remember, but when we saw Rogue One in the theaters, I remember stating that I just didn't like the pacing of the first half of the movie. It was just very different from other Star Wars movies up until that point, which always started off with this big bang, right? And then Rogue One just kind of started like we jumped into an ongoing tale without any intro or war drums or anything. But
Wow.
after watching Andor, the season finale, and then Rogue One and then Star Wars: A New Hope, one after the other, which I did, I realized that the Andor series dovetails really, really nicely with the tone and pacing of the first half of Rogue One. And then the second half of Rogue One dovetails nicely with A New Hope. And the transformation between Andor and Star Wars Episode 4 occurs with the mission on Scarif in Rogue One. That's kind of where it suddenly sped up.
It's funny too. In the ultimate evaluation of the whole thing, in my mind, I finally came to the decision, not decision, realization, whatever you want to call it, that some of the flaws that I was thinking there may have been in pacing or anything like that, I'm walking back on that, because the more I thought about it, the more I kind of evaluated the whole thing. It's like, this was never meant to be a cookie cutter Star Wars movie.
That's
or-
right.
or
It's
series.
its own
It
thing.
was meant to be different. It wasn't meant to be a lot of space battles. It was meant to be
It's a
kind of
spy story. It's a
yeah.
spy-
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's where I thought when you guys were talking about like maybe Darth Vader showing up and all of that, I was thinking, I'm not so sure that's going to happen, because, I was getting accustomed to the style of the Andor series as a whole, and I had a pretty good idea of what it was trying to do. And as we've stated like endlessly already, its goal is to set a focus on the personal experiences and relationship of characters, who they only had a side role in the movies or no role at all.
Right.
But it was not intended to be a playbook on, how the Rebel Alliance was strategically assembled, nor was it about main theme characters like the Skywalkers and their opponents. So I expected the ending we got.
What it was about was showing you how close to failure all this was, and how, faceless, nameless characters along the way got to Luke and Han getting that medal.
And did you notice, like, right when I was watching Star Wars, R2-D2 was right back inside the Death Star with the plans that they went through. We went through 2 seasons and all of this stuff to get through, and the Scarif thing and all of that. And he's right there in the Death Star. He could, if he had gotten caught, all of that would have been for nothing.
All of it. It's hanging by a thread for 8 hours of narrative filmmaking or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is, that's the whole point. That's why you stay on engaged.
Yeah.
But that's true. They get the plans into R2-D2. He goes to Tatooine. He escapes Tatooine. He gets sucked into the Death Star, and he's running around the corridors of the Death Star. All it would take is like one blaster to hit him, and then it's over.
Yeah. Well, my reaction in the movie. So the series is, because I agree with you, Menza Boy, and the writing and the characters and all of that. I like the writing of it, but at the end of the day, it just didn't make me very excited, because at the end it was kind of anticlimactic for me, and there was a lot of
you know what
character
was going to
development
happen.
that,
You know how it's going to end. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. And I know it was by design, but the design is not really what I would have written. It wouldn't have been what I would have gone for, to be honest. A lot of the character development didn't really result in a lot of payoffs, because like we said, Deidre Miro, whatever her name is, ends up in jail after all her attempts at ladder climbing, and that's it for her. Cyril just ends up shot in the head seconds after he probably realizes he's on the wrong side of history. Luthen kills himself. Oh, by the way, they've got spoilers. But then there's Andor, and Andor's just going on one mission after the other, like he's always doing, and at the end of this one, he sort of marches off at the end, leaving the world, with a baby that I don't think he knows about, right?
No, I don't think he did.
No.
That was a big question that I felt like I had, and there were things in there that I obviously really liked. I mean, there were amazing, just the set designs, the locations, the costumes, equipment, the ships. I mean, the production value was top tier.
Yeah, it was.
Cinematography, the gritty world. Even a lot of the character dialogue I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
And Luthen was an awesome character. I thought,
Yeah.
I really wanted to see more and more of him. And even though we got to see a little bit of his background, I there were still things in there. I was like, what? But there were some things in there that I felt like, again, to Legend Maker, what you're saying is that there were these things in it that, they introduced these characters to try to drive some kind of relationship or some empathy or some sympathy, to draw the viewer into the story. But those characters that they drew us into really didn't result in anything that really changed or affected things in a way that are pivotal, except for, in my opinion, Dedra. I think Dedra was like, she was the antagonist, really driving a lot of it, and then suddenly she just kind of had this really weird ending where she's so methodical and calculating, and then she just kind of goes Lone Ranger after getting assumed a big promotion for Gorman. And then there were things in there that were just left dangling that I wanted to see more, because I felt like it was more relevant to this whole story about the rebellion and how this is leading up to Rogue One and then to Star Wars. And that was just all around the Death Star. The Death Star is this looming, weapon that's out there. And there just really wasn't a lot of information about it. We heard, or we learned through Lonnie Jung, who's the mole in the ISG that Luthen was cultivating, and he snuck into Dedra's files and learned all this stuff. And, I wished we could have seen just a little bit more of that and really understood what was going on. And then the rebel factions, I've said this in the last two sessions, is that I really wanted to understand and have a better way of feeling the conflict and the disagreements around the different factions and why it was so difficult for them to try to pull this together. Because when I watched these last three episodes, I kept thinking, this rebel council, they're a bunch of weak administrators. They're not up to the task for military. They were, at a certain point, Cassian was rebelling against the rebel council.
No, you're in Saw Gerrera's camp at this point. Then,
but you get all
that was his objection.
Rex, you get all that in Rogue One. Everything you're asking for. You get Death Star in space. You get
we don't get the background behind it. Like we don't know how Saw is on Jeddah. We didn't. We learned that he's there and they're trying to get the crystals. We don't really. We never see the breakdown between the Rebel Alliance Council. Here you have these former senators. and they're angry, and they're arguing with Saul and trying to keep
well, and
this is
what I've been kind of saying. There's a lot of now Luthen, I thought, had a pretty good story arc for him.
Oh yeah, they had a complete arc with
he had a complete arc, but a lot of the other characters in here didn't have much of an arc. Like Saw Gerrera doesn't add much to his character arc. He's just a neurotic terrorist who likes sniffing fumes. There's nothing else about him.
And then that was one thing that I walked away from. I walked away from this series still uncertain why he was so at odds with the rebellion leadership. That's one of the things. But also, as far as the Death Star goes, personally for me, I think, good Lord, I don't need to know anything else about the Death Star. It's been done and done and done. We had the Death Star. We had the second Death Star. We had, Star Killer, which was just an even bigger Death Star. I'm like, okay, I don't need any more planet weapons.
Well,
I've heard enough about those.
I actually think that for the time they had left and the threads they had to tie up, I think those last 3 episodes were excellent. And
I do too.
An easy thing to tie up. That's a lot of content to wrap up. A season and 9 episodes of the show.
I thought it was classy. Yeah, I mean, it was classy. It was they did a class act job at writing it. I think that
it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and it was a strange kind of experience watching this whole story, knowing how it was going to end. That was kind of different. It's like you almost well, I mean, you read a series of books out of order.
But you kind of don't know what's going to happen to a few characters that you've been introduced to that you're interested in.
True.
Like Krennic lives, Andor lives, but you don't know what happens to Bix. You don't know what happens to Dedra. You don't know what happens really to Luthen, even though you think you know. So there were some surprises there or resolutions.
Speaking of Krennic,
Cassian's baby, with Bix having the baby, I feel like that. Wow, that was kind of a bittersweet moment.
Yeah.
But in my mind, that was the big question I asked myself: is would Cassian have continued if Bix would have told him that she was pregnant? Because he was already willing to start.
He tried to quit a bunch of times. Like he wanted out.
He'd go with her, and also that's why she didn't tell him, because she's a believer in the rebellion.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's exactly back to the point of when he was deprived of her, that kind of sealed his fate.
Yeah. But how did that end up for him, though? Because you look at it, the council was pushing him. Well, I know, but the council was sidelining him. Remember, they kept saying, "No, you just do this, you just do that."
He's too valuable and operative not to use. That they don't have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So and also there was a line in the final episode there where it said that contact on Kafrene, is that the name of that asteroid?
Yeah, Kafrene.
That contact would only talk to him. You remember that line?
Yeah, that was Tivik. Yeah.
So he's incredibly important to the rebellion. He just is.
Well, he became that way, but remember, he comes back after rescuing Clea, and he's having to remind them all the sacrifices of Luthen. And I thought, has it really been? It's only been 1 year. Have they really?
They're all arrogant former senators and planet leaders.
Yeah. It's not so much they've forgotten anything; they just don't want to give him the credit.
Yeah, that's right. It's human nature.
I'll tell you, when you guys
felt like they were weak, they were indecisive. They weren't able to make a decision, and that's why they had all these like spin-offs and all these fragments, because all they knew how to do was administrate and talk and negotiate.
That's why you need Luke, Han, and Leia to get things done.
Right. But even then, it's just kind of like, well, all right, how effective are they really as a leadership team making decisions that ultimately are wrong?
Well, and that brings up an interesting thing, actually. So like, it's never been very clear to me what the rank and file is with this alliance in the first place. Because I know General Dodonna is supposed to be, I think, intended to be the military leader on Yavin, at least, who assembles, he's kind of assembles everything there. And then Mon Mothma and a few others sort of share the political leadership. But
I think it's at the very top. It's Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, that dude from Gorman. Remember that same guy who was the leader of Gorman? He was in there at the end. And then you get the military guys. Then you
Yeah.
get the
And then that
general.
lady, there was that other, I don't know if she was a senator or whatever, that
Yeah,
girl.
she was another senator that popped up in Rogue One, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
She was in
where,
Rogue. I
where
don't
did
know
she
what
come
world
from?
she was a naysayer. I don't know what world she comes from, but she's always taken the devil's advocate position
And the
against
thing
the
about Mon Mothma, so like she has a lot more story now with Andor, although her story arc is kind of broken up and doesn't really resolve
Oh
itself.
yeah,
But
I think they made her a very heroic character.
yeah,
You know,
but it's kind of broken up into pieces. Like you don't really know about a lot of things with her. And now when you watch it like I did all the way through, she like vanishes. She wasn't on Yavin
Right.
when
well,
you know.
okay, so that's interesting you say that because you don't see her in Star Wars because they evacuated her off Yavin in case the Death Star blew it up, the rebellion would live on.
Yeah.
That was
And she
on
wasn't on
purpose.
Hoth either.
No,
Why was
was
she
not.
so important to begin with? You know, I would think Luthen would be more important to the
Well, he was
rebellion.
gone by that point.
Mothma, well,
Yeah,
I
he
know,
did.
yeah. Well, that's a whole topic I want to talk
Yeah,
about.
but no, that was
that-
that was two completely different approaches, though, Rex. It was like Luthen was the behind the scenes. He was Black Ops, and she was in the front. She was the
Yeah.
face of the whole.
So I
thing.
think
She
the
was out
thing
front of
is
everybody.
there's a what one thing that I very much noticed was she kind of represents more of a moral grounding, whereas he represented like he and Andor and even Saw to a more extreme represented we're gonna be black and we're gonna do whatever black things we need to do in order for this to work. And
Yeah, they're the heads of the CIA and the NSA.
I just felt like that it's always important that when you're in a situation like a rebellion to where you have to be disruptive. There has to be conflict. There has to be suffering in order to get attention. And that is typically led by people willing to take risk and to do things that many others. But she wasn't. Later takes over. Well, later in a rebellion, after it succeeds or it achieves whatever it needs to achieve, then the diplomacy comes into play. And it felt like to me, diplomacy came a little too soon. They still needed to be aggressive and attack. They didn't need to get into analysis paralysis
Well,
with the council.
That may be why her role was minimized in Star Wars.
Well, but also keep in mind that her whole character arc throughout Andor was trying to prevent this blowing up into a full-scale rebellion. That would not have been her first choice. It's just that's what it was pushed into. So she was fighting against open conflict, up until there was just no hope.
She wanted to negotiate her way out of it.
Initially, she was sort of testing Palpatine to see how far he would go. And then it was clear that he was an autocratic dictator. And she's like, okay, how do we get him out? And military action was not the first thing they went to, right? Because they didn't have an army.
Yeah,
I think she got a sense of that.
It's not what she knows. She was still doing what she knows.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember, she was trying to get a lot of the other senators to join her into stopping the Gorman thing, and no one was siding with her. And that, to me,
they were all afraid.
Okay,
they were.
That's right. Fear was ruling at that time, and
fear will keep the local systems in line.
That's right. You got it, and it did. And so her effectiveness was like she was more of a figurehead. She wasn't really a good decision maker. She wasn't really like moving the rebellion along other than just
well, she was financing it. That was the biggest thing.
I think Luthen financed it with that Aldani heist.
Well, no, she was redirecting money from her family trust into the rebellion.
That's right.
In the beginning,
she's the investor.
That's right. Who Luthen ended up killing.
So sorry about jumping around here, but that reminds me of another thing. Like in all the little vignettes at the very end where they sort of wrap things up, we see her husband in the car
with the wife of that other guy.
Wife?
Yeah.
What happened to the other guy?
She lost the guy. Wasn't that the guy that got assassinated?
Yeah, that was Skolden.
Killed.
No, he was the gangster guy.
He was the guy who was the father of the kid that married her daughter.
Yeah.
So
that was his wife. That was his wife
yeah.
sleeping or together with Perrin, Mothma's
Right.
husband.
But what happened to him? What happened to the gangster
Well,
guy?
something that was
Uh-huh.
very interesting. I was just kind of reading through. Gilroy did a couple of interviews, and that was something that a lot of other, fans were questioning. And he said that he actually planned a scene where Perrin confesses that he knew all about the rebellion to
Right,
Mothma.
all along.
That's right. And that he was being interrogated frequently by the Imperials, but never said anything to
Yeah,
them.
they kind of gave him a redemption scene and they cut it out.
Yeah,
That's right.
and he said it supposedly that scene created regret with Mothma about keeping Perrin out of her plans, and Gilroy thought that would slow things down, and I felt like actually it would make her sacrifice of what she really had to give up more sympathetic, because right now she's just kind of being carried along, and we were left with, a husband who was gambling, drinking, and kind of disconnected, and a daughter who hated her. But that particular scene would have made her second guess her choices, and then actually going away would have truly been a sacrifice that I felt like people or the viewers might have been able to, connect with a little bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a loose thread, but they just sort of leave her family behind when she leaves them behind.
Yeah. And here's the for me sort of a little elephant in the room is like, we know the Empire, and once it's clear who Mon Mothma was and what she's involved in,
her whole family would have been.
The Empire would have gone after the family.
That's right. I brought that up in our last session. Yep.
They're like the mafia.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
That to me was, again, a missed opportunity. I would have loved to have seen more sacrifice from her, and more of, when you make that decision, it's not just you that's going to be harmed, it's going to be everybody around you, and the impact is just far more,
And I think there's a lot more of her story to tell, really. I mean, when we first were introduced to Mon Mothma, and we all saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, that's the first time we ever saw Mon Mothma, was that.
She's just a middle-aged redhead.
And she just appeared out of nowhere. There was no introduction. And at that point, up to that point, I thought Leia was kind of the political leader of the rebellion or the alliance.
Yeah, me too.
And all of a sudden, Mon Mothma appears. I'm like, who is this? And then she disappears again. And I'm like, what was that? She came out of nowhere. And when she was talking, she was kind of spaced out. Like, she was like really just done with all of this. So, like, there was something really zapped about her.
Yeah, she was taking Xanax at that point.
So they could. There's a lot of room for more on Mon Mothma if they make it interesting. I don't think I want to see any more. I appreciate Andor and what they've done. I just don't want to see another one like it necessarily.
No, I think we're done with this period. I think that here's what I hope happens. I hope that the Disney keepers of the brand can see this kind of Star Wars is something we need more of, which is well thought out,
good writing,
mature, non politically motivated or agenda driven entertainment.
Well, if they follow true to suit, then they're gonna take that and they're gonna beat it until it's a bloody horse patty.
There's 2 shows coming up. There's shooting right now. They're shooting Ahsoka right now. Mandalorian and Grogu's about to start production. And other than those 2, I don't know what else there is in the Star Wars future.
Well, there's supposedly a Rey movie that they still keep spinning, and then there was another guy who got put on for a trilogy, so it's not within the Skywalker saga. It's a different story.
Did they pull the plug on the Taika Waititi film?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think
I don't know. I just
how do you feel about that, Rex?
It could be cool, but I don't know. It seems like it's a hit or miss thing with him,
Well, he did Thor Ragnarok, which I liked, and then he's done some stinkers in addition to that.
Yeah. Well, the Starfighter one I don't know anything about either. The one with Ryan Gosling.
Oh, that's right. The Ryan Reynolds one that was
Ryan Gosling.
I'm Ron Gosling. Excuse me.
Ryan Reynolds. Boy, that would be a weird
I don't
one.
know. Ryan Reynolds is an X-Wing pilot. I don't think there's enough screen.
It's a crossover. Deadpool
Yeah.
comes to Star Wars.
God. But the right, yeah, I actually think that could be good. I think Starfighter might be
I just
what-
wait. I just
what
got
Rogue
this mental.
Squadron evolved into after Patty Jenkins got tossed out.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
yeah.
got this
that's-
mental image of the Death Star painted red with great big Deadpool eyes on it. Now it's called the Dead Star.
Yep.
Sorry.
Don't give him
Sorry,
any
my boy. I
ideas.
totally just walked all over you. What were you saying? Repeat what you said.
All I was
stumped.
saying was the Starfighter thing, which got announced, at that recent conference or celebration in
Yeah.
Japan. That kind of came out of left field to me. I had no idea that was even being thought of.
Oh, I had heard about it a ways back, but it was, I think they kind of refashioned it a little bit. But
Well, the guy who's writing and directing that is the guy who's coming off of Deadpool and Wolverine. He's actually
yeah,
a talented guy, and
Yeah.
he's very excited about it. And that got greenlit pretty fast, it seems like.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
It could be cool. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things to where, being a lifelong fan, you want to see more of that universe, but we've been beat up and disappointed so many times that you're going at it flinching because
yeah, you kind of hold your breath and go, I hope
well,
this is good.
yeah, but we're kind of used to that.
Jedi, whew,
I mean,
that-
if you think about it, if you go all the way back in time, when Return of the Jedi came out, I was so super excited to see Return of the Jedi because
I was very
back
disappointed.
then it was just called Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. There wasn't no episode this and that. But then when Return of the Jedi came out and I watched it, I had really mixed feelings about it because
I didn't like it. I was very disappointed in it.
it was I mean, I was thinking, okay, I really want to watch.
I was thinking Return of the Jedi would be like Rogue One. I thought it was going to be like adult serious warfare movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Empire Strikes Back really had that beautifully well written, epic scores. Everything was so perfect in that movie. And
The Empire Strikes Back was kind of an adult type
and
film.
it was, yeah, it was.
And that's Irvin Kershner, because Lucas didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
He held his ground, and then they get kind of, you get backlash with Return of the Jedi, and Lucas hired a puppet director.
Yeah, well, and Gary Kurtz was gone, and everything changed, and he became
all that. But
he became kind of the leader of the group that no one wanted to say no to at that point.
Yeah.
You know what that brings to my mind? That now that you bring up Return of the Jedi, and I'm thinking about it, it really kind of started a pattern that we have seen, I guess, endlessly now in the Star Wars universe. And that's where you have these really amazing, cool scenes and vignettes of story and plot that is just completely engaging. And then it's a sandwich between a bunch of other stuff that you're like, picks and everything.
You get a lot of peaks and valleys, and the valleys are really deep.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars and Empire were really smooth. They had a better curve. The stories felt so much better when they were going.
But there's one element though that's at play here that there's no escaping though, and that is that I mean when you get right down to it, the original trilogy was basically a seminal moment in science fiction, movie making. And it wasn't, it's not like science fiction was new, but it was a new take on it. It was something that was spectacular and hadn't been seen before, done to that scale. And that newness plays a lot into its success. And you only get that once. You don't get to do that over and over and over again.
Basically, they created a new mythology for the modern, generation, and it's kind of hard to do that twice in a row.
Yeah, and I often wonder. It's like there's probably been a few things like that we've lived through in our lifetimes, and I'm kind of watching the world these days. I'm wondering, is there going to be anything like that? Has something like that happened that it just didn't register with me, or is the world running out of ideas? I wonder sometimes.
Well, it's not so much running out of ideas. it's sort of like we've reached a point where the movie technology has gotten to a point where it looks really good. You know, we can do things in movies now that back then were impossible to do without a ridiculous amount of money and that you could never afford.
Absolutely.
And in fact, it was a joke among screenwriters back then, where you have these spec scripts with these scenes that are just so ridiculously epic that no one would ever make it. And now anybody can make it.
And you can put anything on the page and bring it to life. There's still cost, but
yeah,
I just think the business of entertainment has gotten so risk averse.
That's the problem. There is
no
risk
cap on originality because they don't want to take the risk. Yeah.
Well, but they are taking.
I feel like that's it. It's not that we're losing good ideas. It's that the adverseness to taking any financial risk now by the studios is so overwhelming that they don't want to do anything new. That's why we keep getting the rehashes, and now we're doing live action on animation.
It's run by marketing people. It's a marketing business. At the end of the day,
what we need is, now that we have the technology, like my belief was that, hey, the more technology comes into the hands of the normal, fan or storyteller, the more
we're going to see cool
stories
stuff
we're going to hear and we're going to see. But that hasn't happened. And
it kind of is. It's starting to.
It has in a few places. Yeah, it has. I mean, I just watched a short film made by a YouTuber yesterday that was really good, and I was like, damn, it's kind of a horror thriller, almost like an episode of Outer Limits or Twilight Zone, and it was just made by a guy with like a digital camera and like two actors in an apartment. And I was like, this is original, this is good. Wow, more of this would be nice, please.
I have noticed that the people that are really good with effects and really good with that kind of stuff are not great storytellers. They don't know how to create a cool story. And the people who are good at creating cool stories aren't great at the special effects stuff. So you got to get those two people together.
That's right. I think that's it. We need more collaboration. We need a community that can bring everybody through and join them to some common purpose. And that was like Kickstarter. That's a lot of the other stuff, but it's not.
I have hope that there will be a breakthrough set of films or properties or ideas that kind of come from the grassroots. I really do. I think
one thing popped up that blew me away and gave me hope was, remember, some fan took that fight scene between Vader and old Obi-Wan Kenobi on the Death Star.
And they did a great job with that.
Amazing. I thought, why can't Lucas just copy that, put it in another special edition, because it was so well done.
Yeah. Just pay that guy, whoever did it, and put it in canon, because that's the thing about A New Hope that still just is a real sore thumb, because everything up to that point when you're watching it, Darth Vader has so much more energy in his lightsaber duels and stuff, and all of his battles with Obi-Wan up to that point had so much energy, and then you get to that and it's like someone online was describing as like a couple of old guys, hitting each other with canes or something,
Yeah. And in a way, I guess you can kind of buy that, but that fan redo of that scene was spectacular.
But he did that on it, or I'm not sure who all was involved, but they did that just because they wanted to do it. They had access to the tools, and they just did it. And it was so amazing. And so when I saw that, I thought, hopefully that inspires some other people to go and to fill some gaps or come up with some stuff. But it just really hasn't happened. And then I thought, well, okay, how about not rehashing existing franchises?
Yeah, don't do something original.
How about let's do something original.
Exactly, because they can do, and I said that with a lot of those people that do the Star Trek fan fiction stuff, because a lot of them just go out of their way to create stuff, and they do a fairly good job with it, with the sets and all of these reproduction. But if they put all that energy into something original, they could make a career, but they can't make their career doing fan fiction. They can't.
That's been one of my main gripes, just so much so that I don't even say it anymore. But the whole practice of reimagining a legendary level superhero as somebody completely different, to be politically aware or whatever, for whatever reason they're doing it. It's like, stop doing that. The hero was popular because of who the hero was. Come up with something new.
Yeah.
We've all said this before. It's just like, stop retrofitting. Do something new.
Yeah.
Stop gender swapping, just come up with something new. If you know who,
Yeah.
but just create.
But then
something
you're back.
new.
Then you're back to that risk averse thing again.
I know. That's why we got to find a way. The industry people, fans, or whoever have to find a way to break out and just, find a way to create a platform of distribution that doesn't rely on these old traditional means that is really blocking, the release of these things. I mean, honestly, I don't know what it is. Is it that people making original films are too focused on the cost and the money they want to make, and that's the barrier? Or is it access to tools? Is it distribution? I mean, is it all of the above? But
Even
I wish somebody would come up.
You even have to toss the experience of going to a theater in there. I mean, there's streaming reaches a lot of people. Sure, it does, but it doesn't give you the experience of sitting there with a room full of people, going ooh and ah and clapping for the movie that's on the screen.
Yeah, and
the film that I was mentioning earlier is called The World Over. It's 20 minutes long. The guy made it like a year and a half ago, and you can only see it on YouTube. But all you gotta do is go put The World Over in there, and you'll see an original short film that is basically a network quality Twilight Zone, Outer Limits type show. And I don't even know who made this thing. It was just somebody who did it, and I was like, wow, that is a clever premise, good acting, good effects. Wow. So it's out there.
A lot of what's come out these days is stuff that we would have done, I think, if we were like 25 years ago or something like that. If the technology is where it is today, back when we were all single. Because I mean, two of the people in this foursome here have a degree in cinema. That's me and Men's Boy. Two of the people on here are writers. That's me and Phantom 6. Two of the people on here are, graphic designers and specialists in visuals. That's, Rex Quasar and Phantom 6.
Oh, wait, I got it. Rex Quasar is also a writer. I've published a book.
Well, yeah, but that was
and Mensa Boy is actually an effects technician on 4 feature films.
That's yeah. So I mean, between the four of us,
I do drawings.
I do drawings.
Yeah, but you're also a writer.
So I playing on the computer.
And when I say a writer, I mean a fiction writer, by the way.
I also cook a hell of a spaghetti.
But I mean, between the four of us, there's a lot of talent here, and we haven't gotten together and done anything.
Well, it would have been nice to have digital cameras, YouTube as a distribution platform.
Yeah.
All these tools that we play with now with AI for generating images.
I tried to do little things. You guys remember the little video? All we had was VHS stuff back then, but back in the 80s. And remember, we got together and we would shoot this like James Bond little thing. We threw you off a dock.
I remember vividly, yes.
Hey, I wanted to get back to
I forgot Andor. I was a stuntman too, remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I had some other things, things that I was hoping to see that I didn't see. I wanted to see more about Kino Loy. We just kind of talked about that. And I wanted there to be some resolution around Cassian's sister. And both of those were just kind of left flat. And I don't know how it just popped across my feed, but I saw a interview with Gilroy, and they asked him about it. And he said, they asked him why was there more story about that? And I got his quotes here. He said, what am I going to do that's going to be better than what we did? All it does is minimize that moment where it's revealed that Loy can't swim. Kino is like Cassian's sister. She's much more valuable to me as an absence. His need to return and save people and to be a savior, the compulsion to do that, that comes from this hole in his life. I didn't really want to fill that in. And then his final thing was that will allow people to make up whatever conclusion they like.
Yeah, that's good writing. The guy knows how to tell a story and knows how to manage arcs of characters. And
Well, it's really funny. I saw some clips of an interview with I forget the actress's name that plays Bix, but with her, and the question was, does the child have a name? And when she was asked that question, I mean, she literally got this deer in the headlights look on her face, and she's like, I am not allowed to answer that. And then I think it went over to Gilroy. I believe it was Gilroy. I don't know that I'd recognize him by sight, but it got the impression it was the director. And he just said no, just flat no. So I'm kind of like, okay, which one is it?
There is some scuttlebutt that there will be because of the success of Andor, that there will be a character that shows up in the sequel trilogy, maybe the Rey movie, and it's Cassian's son. And
yeah, the rumors say that the prevailing rumors are right now that Andor's son is either Poe Dameron or Din Djarin.
Well, those kind of fan theories always end up kind of lost in the ether somewhere.
But I think that would be cool. Wouldn't it be cool if that tied into the Mandalorian or even Poe? There was a lot of similar personality traits, at least in the way that he was that character.
Well, and wasn't the Din Djarin character like an orphan that got adopted as well?
Yeah.
Well, but he was older though. So remember, she just shows Bix on a planet, that same planet where she was the mechanic, and it's a baby. So there's obviously, typical Star Wars, 2 years or 10 years later. So
I think
if that little kid becomes Din Djarin, I mean, but good Lord, Bix can't catch a break for crying out loud.
Isn't the sequel trilogy? Is the sequel trilogy 20 years after Return of the Jedi? How many years was it?
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, you still got Star Destroyers on desert planets getting scavenged, so it couldn't be that long, I guess. I don't know.
Well, Rey, I think, is what, late teens, early 20s. So
she's like same age as Luke. She's like 19 or 20.
Okay, so it's got to be around there. Supposedly she's a Palpatine, so she must have been conceived before he got killed. So
somehow I've returned.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. And another fan theory that I thought was amusing was that a lot of theories going back and forth was that Clea, Luthen's assistant, was actually Cassian's sister.
Yeah, I'd seen that. And just to get back to the 3 episodes that we, saw here, we kind of gone all over the place, but I want to give Andor one last little love letter. The fact that they kept us engaged throughout this entire season, with the callbacks to season 1 still kind of resonating, is really good, because there was a fair amount of time in between these 2 seasons. Was it 3 years or 4 years? How long was it?
I don't know.
There's 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's a long time to wait.
That was a long time. It was a long time.
2025. And a lot of the first season stayed with me. Even though I felt like it was a lot of content, I was going to give it credit for kind of the first 2 seasons, actually, the 2 seasons really working well, and one story, even though there was a lot of distance in between them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I never wound up in this series like I have with some of the other Star Wars, definitely some of the Marvel series, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to keep watching it because I've already invested this much time in it.
Yeah,
I was always wanting to find out what's happening in the next episode.
Yeah,
well, Marvel did that with me all the way up until She-Hulk, and then it was like that I'm done.
Yeah, just to confirm, season 1 came out in 2022, season 2 2025, so it was three full years.
Well, I think hands down, season 1 was much more engaging and interesting, where I had to watch what was coming next, than season 2. Season 2 had a lot of conclusions, but it also came with a lot of questions. But it was close to engaging me as much as the Mandalorian season 1 and 2. But so far, Mandalorian season 1 and 2 is hands down, in my opinion, the best out of all those series. It kind of fumbles the ball.
Yeah, the
Season
third. Yeah,
3.
I don't know why they.
Season 1 and 2 were excellent for Mandalorian, but I think Andor is better personally.
Yeah, I'm with Boy on that one. I think Andor edges out the Mandalorian.
I'm agreeing with Rex Fraser on this one. I'm with Rex on that one. I like Mandalorian, at least the first 2 seasons, better.
Yep. It was all new, but yet familiar. We didn't know what was going to happen next. With Andor, we kind of knew what it was all building up to. Just like the prequels, we knew Anakin was going to be Darth Vader. I mean, we knew it, but with the
that's just part you have to accept. But the story can't do anything about that. That's just something you have to accept when you start watching the story.
You know, these disagreements are what makes the Ranting Geeks Pondercast interesting.
Well, it's true. Not even. I mean, it's not like we're saying one is better than the other. It's just a taste. They're designed differently. They have different tones to them, and
make absolutely no mistake. I was a huge fan of the first 2 Mandalorian seasons.
To me, it's tainted a little bit because the 3rd season was.
Yeah, I know
for sure.
The 3rd season, they messed up. They totally dropped the ball there.
I don't know what happened, but that was.
There was
that's what happened.
There was a bunch of drama behind the scenes. I had read something about it and then forgot it because I'm like,
and also when
Jon Favreau was hamstrung. Kennedy, it got really political. He couldn't do what he needed to do.
Yeah,
that's why it sucked.
And then when everything started going about all cutesy with Grogu, I was like, come on. They piled onto that because he was so popular. I'm like, no, come back to the stories, not just cute little baby Yoda.
Yeah.
Great season finale on season 2 for that show, the Return of Luke Skywalker. That was.
No, that's what I'm saying. It was incredible. I didn't really have an amazing. There were very few amazing moments like that. And one of the things out of Andor that just sticks with me, and I lament it because I want to see more, is when Luthen was in the Hall ship and he escaped that Imperial tractor beam and you saw the lightsabers. That surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, if that's what we have to look forward to, this is going to be the best out of all of them. And it just we never really saw the Hall craft after that. We never saw the TIE Avenger.
I had something I wanted to ask you guys because I was confused about one thing. You remember the flashback in episode 10 where you see Luthen sort of rescue Clea? And she's a little girl, and he's wearing like this olive drab uniform. Was he an Imperial soldier or a security officer?
Yes.
Okay.
It was the same as Solo. Remember, Solo was in there in the army, the ground troops.
Okay, so that was an Imperial massacre on some planet,
right?
So he was a reformed Imperial soldier. Okay.
Well, I had that was one thing where I just kind of thought, oh crap, I'm gonna have to write this down as a missed opportunity. When he came out of that, he had demerit. It was like, okay, great, that's how he met Clea. Which, by the way, there was a scene where he looks through that, and I thought this is like a snapshot or an homage to Aliens, where Newt's there and Ripley. I was like, Clea looks like Newt. Anyway, so I felt like, okay, so Luthen, that's where he got Clea. You would think after all of what he saw and then having to take care of this little girl, he would have just ran away and just tried to forget everything and try to lead a normal life. But something somewhere changes and he decides to actually fight back against, the Empire. And we don't know what that is. We miss that key motivation. And that was something that I felt like, if they just could have had a dialogue somewhere saying, you know what, I'm he's having some kind of, flashback where these things are happening. And he says something as simple as, I'm never going to let this happen to anyone else around me as long as I live. And that's what I'm going to do. And Clea, you're just going to have to come along. Something like that would have been so much better. But somehow he just, finds her and then they go off and they blow up a bridge on Naboo. And I'm just kind of like, what? How did we
get here? If you want flashbacks like that, you have to have a Bacta tank.
Well, but it has to be. What I'm saying is that is a core motivation for Luthen to decide instead of flight, he decides fight.
Yeah.
He decides he's going to fight, and on top of that, he's a caregiver for this little girl Clea, and he's going to teach her. So that to me is such a missing core element that would have been so fascinating. And when she had to, disconnect him and let him die, it would have been so much more traumatic to have seen that together. And I don't know. That really kind of stuck with me when I saw
that kind of thing happens a lot in Andor. That's why I was talking to Phantom 6 about how the whole series is sort of like a rock skipping across water, because there's some stories that do this actually in novels and stuff where the plot just sort of like bounces. You basically have a chapter that's hyper focusing on certain things, and then it jumps to another chapter, and you kind of have to backfill in your head stuff that went on and just fill in the blanks on your own, instead of them the writer telling you exactly how the characters, got to be the way they are.
I agree. It makes complete sense, but that to me is a core motivation that sets the course for not only his life, but it sets for Clea's life and ultimately the underpinnings.
It's not bad insight. I think that's pretty good insight. I think that would be one aspect of, because I was saying that his story arc is probably the most complete of them in here. It has the most arc to it because he has an ending. He has a full arc, but he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that kickoff, like you say. It's not an obvious kickoff. He was obviously having some kind of major crisis moment there at the beginning, at that flashback, where people are dying outside and he feels he's on the wrong side of things. And he just makes a decision. He finds that girl, but there is something missing. You're right. There's something there they kind of skip over, and you kind of have to fill it in your head.
That's not something I would like to fill in. I would like to fill in after that, something else. And there was one other thing I wanted to see what you guys thought about it, was that so when Clea and Luthen were there, and Luthen realizes, okay, this is the end. And he's going to he's melting he's pouring that stuff into the communication stuff. And Clea is out. I don't know where Clea is at. Clea's out doing something. And then Daedra shows up. In my mind, when he decided to stab himself and commit suicide, I felt like that was so uncharacteristic. Because to me, the right way for Luthen to have died would have been, there had to be some kind of fail-safe or something.
He should have blown the place up.
Yeah, blew everything up, not left a trace, took Daedra out, took everything out. But
but then they couldn't
seem right.
Then they couldn't have Clea kill him.
But they wouldn't have had to have Clea.
But they wanted to. That's my point. They wanted to have her kill him because it was like supposed to be some moment of pathos.
But I just feel like that could have really been connected more if we saw that motivation earlier, in his origin flashback, and then something else, because I just felt like that they were so meticulous about planning for every variable.
Yeah, that would have made more sense with Luthen's whole approach to the rebellion. Yeah, I would agree.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of funny. I was reading a thing that said Star Wars. All of Star Wars would never have happened if it wasn't for Daedra. Daedra is who we have to thank for all of Star Wars, because she didn't say anything about the mistaken files that she got, and she went, on her own, and that's why everything went sideways for the Empire. If she had just told them, "Hey, I've got this stuff," none of the rest of it would have happened. I was like,
I would have loved to have seen that. Wouldn't that be cool to see her looking at these files going, oh my gosh. Again, it goes back to the Discovery and what's going on with the Death Star.
That kind of knocked me upside the head because I was like, wait, did I miss a scene somewhere? Because, I don't know. I and that happened a lot in Andor. I feel like, did I miss something when I was looking at my iPhone? I don't know.
Now back to your skipping stone situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
The skipping stone format or structure is fine. It's just that when the stone hits the water, you want it to be something that is
A
directly
milestone.
impactful. That's right. It's milestone. It is directly driving this overall thing that we're going in. A
Yeah.
lot of times I felt like it was hitting a milestone
In between the milestones.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what the? So those were my biggest things and why I really never felt that with, I mean, there were some nitpicks with Mandalorian, but nowhere near the level of discontinuity and missed opportunity as Andor. Now, I'm not totally bagging on Andor. I'm thankful for it. I did enjoy a lot of aspects of it, just like I did Return of the Jedi. It had great, it had it had meh. So I'm happy for it. But if going forward, if they were to follow a template for a new Star Wars series, I like the maturity of Andor, but I like the framing and the storytelling of the first two seasons of Mandalorian better. And if they could blend those two with some new story, I would love that. I mean, I feel like most Star Wars fans would enjoy that because it hits in all cylinders of why we love that universe.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that universe and why we love it, how long we've been going now?
Almost exactly an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to wrap this one up, gentlemen.
All right. So we're going to have to come up with our subject for the next episode, which should be fun. We can come up with something that doesn't require us to.
There's a lot of new movies about to come out. Some new TV series as well.
Well, that's true, but we can also just do random things that are controversial that we can all disagree on, which would be fun to argue about. Older things.
Well, we're not arguing. We're just pondering. We're expressing our differences of perspective so that the combined, unique perspectives resolve into something much more interesting than what you might gather from others.
Yeah, I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why y'all are wrong.
Yeah,
I can say this. I think it's a high probability that we'll have James Gunn's Superman as a Pondercast.
For
I'm
sure.
saying that's a pretty good,
absolutely for
good
sure.
chance on that one.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
And probably Fantastic Four as well.
Yeah, that too.
Although the rumblings coming out now, Pedro
here we go.
is up to it. Yeah, he's already stirring things up, and Disney's trying to do, damage control. So, why can't we just,
Well, you give a lot more weight to a lot of those rumors than I do. I just don't give any weight to these people.
There you go. Let's
think they know
disagree
stuff.
about that.
I'll have to go look, see if I can find what you're talking about now.
Well, so ends Random Geeks Pondercast episode 3 on Andor season 2's last 3 episodes. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye,
May
everybody.
the force be with you.
Bye bye.
Nanu.
Bye.